Troglodyte warning, Mehdi Hasan tears Elon Musk to shreds on his self-red pilling, his move to the far right. He's now a white supremacist and fascist enabler. So let's get straight into the video.
You recently, you think Elon Musk is promoting racist and Islamophobic tropes across the UK? I mean, yeah, but that's not the issue right now. What do you think motivates him?
That is a great question. People's heads who I can't get inside of are Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and they are the two most important people in America right now, sadly. I don't know what motivates him, right? This is a great question about the Zuckerbergs, Musks, and the tech bros. What is driving them? Is it personal gain and self-aggrandizement? Are they supporting Republicans because they just want lower taxes and less regulation, which is one cynical, simple explanation. I think in Zuckerberg's case, that is probably the case. With Musk, I think he has red-pilled himself in plain sight. I think we've watched him over the last 2, 3, 4 years radicalize online. We've seen his interactions. He's done it not in his mum's basement hidden away. He's done it in the sight of the entire world with 200 million followers. And I think we've seen that over the years. He's become more and more radical. I mean, I was never a fan of Elon Musk. Even when he was just famous for his cars and pretending to be Tony Stark in real life, I always thought he was deeply overrated and annoying. But I didn't think he was a white supremacist or a conspiracy theorist or an enabler of fascists. That is what he's become in recent years. And yeah, you have to ask the question. I don't know. A psychologist would have to analyze him. I don't know if you follow his trans daughter on one of the social media sites. She's always giving all sorts of explanations for why she thinks her father is gone a bit nuts. And she says he was always a bit right-wing and bigoted towards Muslims and others. So she says. I'm sure he would deny it. But the reality...
I think with Musk, like Donald Trump, their motivations come from a deep sense of insecurity. Specifically with Musk, he just wants to be liked. This is why this Path of Exile 2, Diablo 4, even with Elden Ring, he has paid people to pay these games, specifically Path of Exile 2, at professional level and act like he's playing them. He wants to be liked by this game bro, kind of libertarian community, and it's kind of gone, backfired completely against him, like it did with the H-1B visas. Yes, he's in it for himself. He only cares about money, but he just wants to be liked. And it's kind of sad and pathetic because he will go to that extent and he has such a lack of self-awareness of kind of what he's doing. He played the game and people caught onto him like, oh no, he's not as good as this game as he's saying. And again, his sexual insecurity as well. He famously offered a horse to one of his employees for a hand job. Like, this guy's a billionaire and he has to offer horses. It's deep insecurity.
reality is, it doesn't matter what's in his head. This is like this old chestnut that media newsrooms did during the first Trump term. We can't call him a racist. We don't know what's in his heart. I don't give a shit what's in people's hearts or heads. I give a shit what they say and do. That's what I'm going to judge you on. And what he says and does is deeply bigoted, dangerous, conspiratorial, delusional, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, and more.
His recent interventions in British politics have been about basically sort of revitalizing stories about grooming gangs, which
Yes.
he refers to alternately as Asian grooming gangs, Muslim grooming gangs, British Pakistani grooming gangs, and so on. How does that look for you, where you are, speaking as a British Muslim, the way that story's been developing in the UK over the last week or so?
It's horrific. And look, this story, even when it first broke, and it was the Times and Andrew Norfolk that broke the story originally in the way that we understand it today, even that came with all sorts of tropes, right? Like this is one. I was on Piers Morgan's show recently for My Sins, and I said the same thing to him. I said, look, I'm not against just talking about this. These are horrific crimes. And if there's a racial angle, we should talk about the racial angle. It's how you do it, right? The problem is, as you know, Hugo, there's enough bad faith actors willing to jump on any bandwagon. And there are people who want to have sensitive, nuanced discussions about this stuff, but they can't because the Elon Musks and, of course, the Tommy Robinsons come barging in the way, pushing their own racist agendas, I would add in the Nigel Farages of this world. And that's a real problem. I think British Muslims already were living in a lot of...
Yeah, it is a huge problem. It's like men's issues with Andrew Tate. There are real issues that the left often feel, I think they do work, but can't discuss because the bad faith actors will jump on a study. So if we do a study, they will jump on it and kind of use it in their cynical way, just to weaponize it. You saw it with Richard Tice when he was talking about the grooming gangs, and he was talking about it in terms of white girls. Didn't mention the Asian girls that were already affected, only the white girls. So yeah, your Tommy Robinsons, your Nigel Farages, your Elon Musks will jump on it and muddy the water and spread misinformation. And it makes it hard to have a legitimate and sensible conversation about this stuff.
Fear and paranoia post the riot. I came back a few months ago. When is it? September, I think it was. And I was talking to Nish Kumar, who's not Muslim, British Asian comedian. And he was saying, like, I've never felt like this before. After these riots, the Southport riots, as a British Asian, I've never felt as insecure as I feel in my country right now. He's not even Muslim, which was about any brown people. Saida Varsi, in her new book on Islamophobia, her opening chapter, she talks about the fact that all her British Muslim friends have discussed a plan B. What happens if we have to leave this country? And as someone of Jewish descent, that is conversations that Jews have had over the years
Of course.
in countries.
Yeah.
And it's not a pleasant conversation for a Muslim minority community to have, whether in the US or in the UK. And this kind of stuff is deeply, deeply weaponized, right? Look, let's talk about grooming and gangs and rape and child sexual. No issues should be off limits. It's how it's done. And why does Musk suddenly kick it off now?
Well,
why bring it up now? Why do it in the way he's done it? Why lie?
Well, it's to take heat off him and MAGA going against him over the H1B visa debacle. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. It's to take heat. He's getting real pressure because Trump ran on deporting 20 million illegal immigrants. Elon Musk is an immigrant. He really depends on the H1B visas, which are massively exploitive. They kind of manipulate people, and he makes it so he can pay people less for doing these professional jobs in Tesla, SpaceX. They get paid less for doing the same job that an American would get paid $100,000 for. They can pay them a fraction of that, $30,000. So that's why he wants it. And then the backlash against that, MAGA want rid of immigration. This is why he's doing it. Pure cynicism. That's why it's so frustrating, because he doesn't care about the victims. He doesn't care about this. I mean, when was he talking about it before? Exactly, he wasn't.
Many of his tweets have just been frankly dishonest and completely made up. It's really, really dangerous. And look, I just say this one thing more. The Christchurch mosque shooter, the guy who went into the 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, and killed over 50 Muslims in Friday prayers, he had For Rotherham written on his ammo, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about having a Rotherham, but it does mean that if you do it in the wrong way, and if you allow the wrong people to weaponize it, people will die.
One way this is being spoken about a lot in right-wing circles in the UK is that what has happened in Rotherham and other places is the product of a view common among some Muslims that people who are not Muslims are not human beings in the same way that they are human beings.
Yeah.
You yourself, some time ago, made comments in a speech you were giving in which you appeared to say things that were kind of along those lines. You said, once we lose the moral high ground, we're no different from the rest of the non-Muslims, human beings who live their lives as animals. Now, you've said you regret saying those remarks, and you've said it often enough that I definitely believe that you do. However, that gives you an insight into this, I would have thought, into the sort of thing people are talking about when they flag up this kind of thing and are alarmed by it. What would you say about that?
So a few things, just to deal with the personal thing first. The remarks that I made, 15, 20 years ago, they were in a religious context. Right? I was giving a kind of religious lecture to Muslims in a religious setting, right? So I don't think it applies in the Rotherham situation. I'll tell you why in a moment. But just to deal with those were remarks about like the theological nature of Muslims versus non-Muslims, the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims, how Muslims approach God. They were horribly phrased. They came out sounding bigoted. And separate remarks, which you haven't mentioned, that I also made, which were about views of kind of gay communities. They were kind of from a very social conservative background upbringing, which, yes, I have rejected a long time ago. And I've spoken about why I've evolved from those views. Now I'm in my mid-40s and take very different views, right? But they were in a I don't think, Hugo, with respect, they apply here because they were a religious discussion. And I don't believe anything that happened in Rotherham where it was religious, right? I interviewed Nazir Afzal the other day, who, as you know, was a former...
So obviously that interview, the interviewer is asking a difficult question there. And I don't necessarily buy Mehdi's answer completely. I mean, the religious angle, well, it's still an essentialist argument. And I don't believe that Mehdi Hasan has an essentialist bone in his body. I don't think he sees necessarily white people as essentially, or Christians as essentially less. I don't believe that. And that's why I think he did roll back on those arguments and probably would challenge that essentialism. But I think it's a good question to ask because that is what's happened. That's what he believed in the past. And that's what Elon Musk is doing. It's an essentialist argument that certain races, religions are inherently inferior.
Crown Chief Prosecutor for the Northwest of England, of British Pakistani descent, Muslim background, locked up a lot of these gang members, both brown and white. And he made the same point. These people are as far away from Islam as you can possible. Like, you don't have to be an expert on Islamic law to know that alcohol pretty much off limits. These guys were not just raping girls. They were plying them with alcohol and drugs to rape them. There were multiple sins and crimes involved from both a secular and an Islamic perspective. None of these people were religious people.
You don't think there's a link between religious attitudes and social attitudes?
I think there may be social attitudes. I don't believe they're religious people. I don't believe these people are religious people, right? And so, but on the social attitudes, let me just address that. So in a couple of the local inquiries, I believe in Telford and maybe Rotherham.
I'm not sure about that fully. I don't know enough about Islam to make a claim on that, but surely there is a link. And yeah, you could say, oh, well, they're not. I mean, you could say that about Christians, couldn't you? Then, oh, if they abuse children, they're not Christians. Well, that doesn't absolve them from their Christianity. And I think that's where we have to have a difficult conversation. Again, but we don't essentialize them as, oh, Muslims and the religion leads to this behavior. Obviously not. In the same way, Christianity doesn't necessarily lead inherently to that behavior. It's what the environment, and often it's socioeconomic and more to do with kind of what environment, like poverty. These areas were areas of poverty. The young girls were working class girls, and I think we should focus on more on social class, if anything.
Rotherham. Some of the independent inquiries we done, they did say that some of this may have been down to, we need to look into political correctness on the side of the councils, police, but also, what were the attitudes of these people towards non-Muslim. But in others, they haven't said that. And I would just make one important point. In the report done by Professor Alexis Jay, she mentions that there were Asian girls who were also abused. What frustrates me is this is framed, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but in general, the media frames this as brown men raping white girls. Put it to one side that there are lots of white gangs who raped white girls in Cornwall, in the West Midlands, in Glasgow, which we're not talking about because that doesn't fit the Farage-Musk agenda. Put that to one side for a moment. Even if we just stick to talking about these horrible men in the Rotherhams and Telfords, they also abused Asian girls. We don't hear enough about those Asian girls. A, it doesn't fit a political agenda. B, a lot of them didn't come forward because of the whole shame inside the Asian community. And so this idea that this was just like a brown man going, well, those white girls, they're lesser than us. That doesn't, as we know, with all the research on rapists and abuse, they tend to abuse the people closest to them. And that includes Asian girls in their own communities, their own families. So I would like to see, let's have another national inquiry. I'm not in favor of another national inquiry, but I do want to see a lot more of the research and data that is out there already on the attitudes of these men, what they did, which girls were affected. I don't think it's just too lazy and easy to say, well, it was brown men looking down on white girls. Also doesn't explain Cornwall, West Midlands, Glasgow and beyond. Why were white men grooming white girls? There's no Islamic or race angle there. And as Nazir Afzal points out, if you just make it about brown men, you're ignoring 97% of the child sexual abuse in this country, and you're ignoring the victims of those crimes. I would like to treat the victims equally, regardless of the race, ethnicity or religion of the perpetrator.
True.
Mehdi Hasan, I wish we had more time, but I'm afraid I've got to vacate the studio. Before I let you go, are you ever coming back to us?
That's a great question. At the moment, not voluntarily, but we'll see what happens in the course of the next 4 years.
Mehdi Hasan, thank you very much indeed.
If you like the video, hit the like button, and I'll see you next time.